What Once Was Mine, Chapter 36, Rapunzel. You know, if you're gonna keep doing this kind of thing, we're gonna have to assign a watch goat to follow you around everywhere. Rapunzel opened one eye to see Gina looking blandly down at her. She was confused for a moment as to where she was lying, but the warm discomfort of being tucked in between a couple of goats made that evident immediately. So did the smell. What Rapunzel did at first thought was kind of unusual, but somehow comforting now overpowered her to the point of nausea. She covered her nose with a lock of her hair, only to realize with horror that it smelled of goat too. Yeah, maybe you want to take a bath or something? Gina suggested. She looked fresh, for once, out of her traveling and fighting clothes, dressed in a comfy-looking short green tunic and sandals, her braids slick and still wet, as if she had braided it up again immediately after watching it. Maybe, Rapunzel admitted, carefully extracting herself from between the goats, who seemed a little miffed she was going. Pascal waved goodbye to them, but it was unclear whether it was in triumph for leaving or sadness at going. There's a nice pool up at stream a bit, Gina suggested, handing her an old, but clean, rag in a small pot. While the semi-soiled solid oils or whatever inside had a very faint whiff of something animal, goat, it was overpowered by bright, clean herbs and dried flowers. I feel like you were planning this, Rapunzel said accusingly. As they walked into the woods, Rapunzel's hair trailed out behind her. Gina kept on looking back as if it were a snake or something else, unexpected, and maybe just a little bit creepy. The sparkling pool of water they came to was absolutely beautiful and freezing. As Rapunzel found when she dipped a toe in, she shivered and made a face. Sorry, Your Highness, Gina said. It's all we got. Rapunzel scooped up a handful of the water and pitched it at Gina. I'm so sick of the two of you calling me a princess. I don't even know what real ones look or act like. Okay, Gina said with a shrug as if the water ran down her face. If it bothers you that much, I'll stop. Wait, really? It's nothing serious. It's just a game. I don't know. You've never had friends that you've goofed around with, I guess. No, I haven't. Rapunzel thought about this as she carefully set Pascal down in a puddle of sunlight on a warm rock. Then she undressed and forced herself to get into the water quickly, without any hesitation. She gritted her teeth and refused to shiver. Whatever royal princesses were like, future queens had to be brave and stoic if they were going to get any respect from their people, right? Gina watched with fascination, and maybe a little bit of horror, as Rapunzel pulled out all of her hair into the pool, armload after armload. So, you and Flynn had a fight? Did he tell you? Rapunzel asked, unsure if she was curious, angry, or curious hopeful. Nah, but it was pretty obvious after he went to sleep with the goats and he stomped around for a while outside. I gave him the crown back, threw it at him, actually. Gina's eyes popped open in shock. Rapunzel suddenly realized what her thought's gesture meant to the other girl. I promise if and when I am ever, restored to my kingdom, I'll make sure you get some other reward, just as sparkly, or I'll make him break it in half or whatever. No, I don't need half a crown, Gina said. Then she thought about this. Well, actually, it'd be kind of nice. I could get a horse, a nicer cloak. Maybe I could get another crown. You could give it to me. Or a horse, I mean. Give me a horse, not give it to a horse. What about Flynn? Oh, enough about him. He just needs to get this over with, grab his reward and move on. I'm just a side story on the epic of the great Flynn writer who's made up about himself, the princess he rescued along the way to fame and fortune. She angrily scrubbed herself and her hair in silence after a few minutes before getting out. Gina didn't say anything else. The other girl had thoughtfully brought another tunic with her. It was undyed and off-white. Angora goat wool, of course. Not the linen and silk Rapunzel was used to. Princess, she hissed to herself ironically. It wasn't as scratchy as she feared and soft with age. Sorry, one of Mom's, Gina said. You and I are built, differently. Otherwise, I'd loan you one of mine. Rapunzel tried not to look at Gina's muscles and curves and then at her own flatter chest. She wasn't embarrassed, merely curious. She scooped up Pascal and they headed back out of the forest. Rapunzel felt like she had just engaged in some ancient rite, that she was some priestess who bathed in a sacred stream and then put in the vestments of ritual. Her silver hair solemnized the idea, trailing out behind her like elven robes. Maybe, Gina suddenly said out of nowhere, though it was obvious that she thought she had been pure clothing slowly through her mind. Maybe Flynn is saying all these things about getting his and getting out because he's afraid of being hurt. Maybe he's afraid of having to leave and losing you to your new life. Your new life as a princess, I mean. Maybe he can't say that, so he just says princess a lot instead. Rapunzel's eyes widened in surprise. The thought had never even occurred to her. Back at the cottage, her new plain wool dress offered a blank canvas and exciting opportunity to try her magic, and forget about Flynn for a while. On the chart, it was day 8. On her mural/mandala, it was nearly a half moon. She stared at the image and retraced it with the plain end of her charcoal stick, feeling the shape of the moon. Her hair began to glow. Stripes, she murmured. I want stripes on my robe, or polka dots. She stood up and raised her arms, letting her hair fall all against the length of her dress, front and back, covering it entirely. There were sparkles everywhere, and then she felt something itchy and tickly on her arm. Rapunzel shifted around in her, shift, and shrieked at what she saw. One end of a stray thread was waving slowly in the air, rising up from the garment and pulling away. It was a weft thread, one that weaves back and forth over the whole cloth and holds it all together, and it was unraveling rapidly. When it was long enough to touch the ground, it began to pull there, pulling faster and faster. Wait, no, stop, this isn't mine, Rapunzel shouted. She grabbed at the yarn and tried to hold it still. It wriggled desperately out of her grasp, possibly like a worm. But it seemed that her command was enough. The sparkles dissipated, and the unweaving stopped. Her hair ceased glowing. The dress was only partially undone at the top. Feeling strangely exhausted, she fell back onto the stool and regarded the mess. Why had it done that? Did this moon phase mean destruction? Unraveling? The magic was still transformative. That much was clear. The dress had been acted on and changed. It hasn't disappeared or floated off or whatever else. She sat quietly for a bit, drinking tea and resting and studying her mandala. Then she tried again, and this time holding her black smudged mug. The change was too fast for her to stop. Within moments, the cup sort of thickened, then collapsed into a wet pile of clay. Pits, Rapunzel swore. She thought she would keep that mug as a memento of one of the first times she had performed magic correctly, without killing anything. Disheartened, she dolefully poked at the little glob of clay with one of her pokey sticks. It seemed like the power of day 8, the waxing half-moon, was to transform an object into a pile of rubbish, which kind of made sense. It was closer to a new moon, which was death, and nearly half a whole moon, which was healing. She shuddered to think what it would do to a chicken or Pascal. Not feeling up to trying again immediately, she looked around for something else to do, magic-related. On a scrap of bark, she painted a full moon. On the other side of it, a waxing crescent. A tiny token she would carry with her if she needed to use her magic, and didn't have the mandala on the good wife's bench. Maybe someday she could have her own workshop. In her mind, it looked a bit like the main room in her tower, with an entire wall that she painted with images of the moon. And maybe she would paint the floor, too. Pleased with her work, but done with it, she began to play with the other things on her desk. A feather, a crystal, a pair of goat shears. She picked the last thing up with interest. Gothel had told her that cutting her hair would kill her. The good wife said that was nonsense. It would only affect her powers, if anything at all. And come to think of it, Rapunzel did lose the occasional hair when it got caught on something, or when she was combing it out. The dead hairs turned a dull brown, and it used to panic her when she was little. Did it take a day off her life? A month? A year? She thoughtfully wrapped a lock of hair around her fingers. Biting her lip, she brought the shears up. Rapunzel, what are you doing? No! Flynn had quietly come in, and had paused at the door, preparing to say something theatrical, but immediately dropped all playing. He ran over and grabbed her hands, holding them away from her. What? Oh! Rapunzel said, confused, and taking a moment to figure out what he was doing. You thought I was going to hurt myself? You didn't hear what the good wife said. Cutting my hair won't kill me. Oh, no, I did not hear that, Flynn said, collapsing against the edge of the workbench. But he didn't let go of her right hand. Maybe when the group learns something important like that, you could let me in on it, keep me in the loop. Sorry, she said, a little chagrined. I guess this looked really bad, didn't it? You have no idea. Rapunzel, I think I died a little when I saw that. He opened his mouth, trying to say something else. Was he gonna go into a full funny Flynn Rider mode? Or was he actually gonna say something serious? Rapunzel could hardly breathe, waiting to see. And then he kissed her. It wasn't like the night before, when there was a pause and a feeling of expectation. He took her face in his hands and pressed his lips to hers, with desperation, maybe as if she really had almost died. Rapunzel shivered, if for the slightest moment panicked that it was her magic activating, but it wasn't. When he stopped, she reached up and touched his lips gently. She didn't want the moment to end. I don't want to lose you, he whispered, but if I have to, I'd rather have it be your happy ending than to. Brigands and mercenaries or a hair-related death, I know you do care, Flynn Rider. It's a curse, really, he said with a dramatic sigh, backing away, retreating into a full Flynn Rider. I'm too sensitive and caring ever since I was a boy. That was funny, thinking of Flynn Rider as a boy, before he pulled out all these airs and Rapunzel's green eyes popped wide open. A boy. They're not being destroyed, she cried, pushing him gently but firmly aside. They're being returned to earlier states. She picked up the glob of clay and ran it through her fingers. Oh yes, this is a lovely moment. Flynn, now can I get back to my witchy business? He quipped. Rapunzel ignored him. The power of being the waxing half-moon and turn as something younger, into a previous version of itself. She explained triumphantly. This is my mug. Now it's back to being clay, and now my dress is began to unweave. I'll bet it has something it would have back to being wool, or a whole fleece. Amazing. Yea, the goddess? It is amazing, she said, beaming, and kissed him full on the lips again. Everything is amazing. Look, I could stay and do this all day. I'm happy for you, but this is also very, very strange and kind of out of my wheelhouse, so I'll leave you to it. We can pick this up later. He turned to go, but stopped when he reached the door. Are we... I forgive you, Rapunzel said, reviewing her mandala, pretending to be haughty. You forgave me? I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only participant in our little tiff. Begone, before I turn you into a babe in arms, or a toad. She waved her arms menacingly above her head. Leaving, he ducked his head out and ran out. Rapunzel collapsed into a fit of giggles and tried to concentrate on magic, and not what it was like kissing him. It was hard. A feather grew sleek and colorful and disappeared. Back to a bird it fell from. A bent nail became a lump of iron. A rock stayed a rock, even when she sweated and concentrated and almost passed out from using her magic. Maybe it got little bigger. It was sobering to think how many thousands of years that rock had been almost exactly the same size and shape. An eggshell became a disgusting mess she resolved to never think of again. Exhausted and due for a break, Rapunzel decided to go outside and get some fresh air. A goat followed her. She kept feeding it handfuls of flowers, and the two wandered together across the little vale into the far side, where her journey to the circle of stones had begun. There were some very tasty, as yet unnibbled, blossoms over there. Suddenly the goat froze. One of its ears twitched. It turned its creepy eyes to look into the woods. Rapunzel also stopped, unconsciously, imitating the goat in a way it cocked its head. There was a distant sound, intermittent and garbled. Was it something crashing through the brush? Was it a deer making some sort of deery noise? The sounds of men shouting? Hello? Rapunzel called out cautiously. There were woodsmen in the woods, of course, and hunters, and other people who occasionally stumbled into the good wife's hidden valley, and now the forest was thick with snugly duckling refugees, and also men who were trying to capture her. Was it better to hide or run back to the cottage and warn everyone, or should she confront the potential intruders, as future queen and present sorceress? The goat bleated once and began to awkwardly gallop away. Good choice, Rapunzel decided, following its lead. She put a hand onto Pascal to keep him steady and ran for the cottage. Flynn and Gina could fight anyone off, and the good wife would know what to do. She would either defend them with mighty powers or shield Rapunzel from fearing the locals. As she passed under the pear tree, 2 men leapt from its branches and seized her. One violently grabbed her arms, yanking hard. The other put a large gloved hand over her mouth, so she couldn't scream or bite. The noises in the woods were a ruse, she realized, a very clever and subtle one to distract her from the real danger. She kicked and flailed. She tried to remember what Flynn and Gina had done when she had seen them fight, and accomplished nothing. It was like attacking a wall. With quick, efficient moves, the one who had put his hand on her face now forced a leather thong across her mouth and tied it around her head. The other held her down and tied her arms to her side. Finally, they shoved her brutally down with the ground and wound ropes around her ankles, pulling tight. That really hurt. The rough hemp chafed her bare skin. Once she was bound up like a caterpillar, the first man, Rapunzel labeled him as Gagger, grunted in approval. He then reached down and threw her over his shoulder as if she were no more than a doll. Rapunzel twisted and struggled and tried to kick him in the ribs with the points of her toes, but they did nothing against his leather jerkin. She lifted her head, just long enough to see the snug little cottage retreating into the distance, and it fall back against his shoulder blade, as hard as he could, but all it did was hurt her nose in a terrible crunch. She tried to summon her magic. Turning him into a boy wouldn't be deadly and probably quite surprising, but she was exhausted. Nothing came, not a single sparkle. She screamed incoherently, hoping they would think it was foul, nasty curses and swears. She didn't actually know any, but the intent was there. As soon as they had carried her far enough into the woods to be hidden from the house, they stopped and threw her down on the ground. "I'll go tell Krasky," not Gagger said. "You keep an eye on her." She tried not to think about how both guards would have stayed to keep their eyes on Flynn and Gina. When would anyone notice she was gone? When Flynn come to the cottage looking for her? She arched back and dug her heels into the ground, straining against her bonds. Her guards watched it with bored amusement. His greasy jacket with a hound on it was some sort of tree on the upper right. Pascal stuck a cautious nose through her hair, scenting the air to see if it was safe. "Pascal," she whispered. "Oh, help! Help!" The previous version of Pascal could have skittered off faster than sight, a liquid streak of color through the grass, but he would have understood nothing and returned after eating a fly or two. This Pascal understood. What she wanted perfectly and began, with obvious determination, to hurry back to the hut. But dragons were apparently not made for walking on land. His strange toes were built for clasping into branches and vines. Rapunzel watched in disappointment as he marched away. If he was lucky, he would make it to the cottage by dark. Her captor, who had been paring his nails with a very sharp knife, began to spin the blade on his fingers thoughtfully. "Say, a lock of that hair of yours would make a nice trophy," he began, even though he knew that cutting it wouldn't do anything for her. The menace in his face and the glint of his blade was terrifying. "Might make the whole thing worth it," he continued with a nasty grin. "Trapezing through these stinking haunted woods. My cousin went missing, you know. Came back rambling on about witches and nonsense. Oh, yes, this'll be my prize." Rapunzel suddenly wasn't sure he was just going to take a lock of her hair. She began screaming again, and the man's eyes pied wide, and he fell forward. She screeched and managed to roll out of the way just in time to his giant, partially armored body hit the ground next to her. There, standing there, had been a moment ago, was Gothel, a heavy mallet in her hand. Rapunzel said in awe. The dark-haired woman was extended to her full height on her tiptoes, arms raised, skinny neck straining with the effort of reaching the man's head for one perfect blow. She blinked slowly, as if shocked by her own boldness. Rapunzel said again. "Rapunzel," Gothel said in a breath, putting a hand to her stomach. "I cannot believe I just did that, can you?" Rapunzel said a third time, eyes filling with tears. She wasn't sure why she was crying, overcome with gratitude, certainly, but it was also something her mother standing there defending the bad guys. She had always said that Rapunzel needed her mother to protect her, and she was right. "Here, let's get you out of this nasty mess and out of here," Gothel said, taking the knife from the unconscious man's hand with one efficient swoop. Rapunzel watched this with wonder, but she would think of it again, later. How easily and quickly her mother had grabbed a weapon out of a felled man's hand. It wasn't something a girl who spent her life in a tower would have necessarily thought of. She would have at least taken a moment to consider, looking around, deciding what her options were. But that was later. Right then, as her mother leapt over and began to methodically saw off the thongs and ropes, all Rapunzel could feel was relief and gratitude. "Oh, my poor, poor dear," Gothel said, rubbing her daughter's arms to get the circulation back into them. "Mother!" Rapunzel sobbed and threw herself forward, hugging the other woman so tightly it was like she was trying to combine their bodies. "Oh, all right now, all right," Gothel said, a little disturbed, as always, by her daughter's emotional response. It was like her hands, so nimble and efficient before, now didn't know what to do. They hung in the air uselessly, even the one with the knife on it. "Everyone's after me, Mother," Rapunzel said, crying. "It's putting all my friends in danger, and there are mercenaries everywhere, and everything is just starting to be wonderful." There, all right. Let's get you out of there before they come back and find us. And that fellow on the ground there." She stood and gave her daughter a hand up. Then she pinched one of her cheeks. "Enough with the tears. You know they age you prematurely. You can tell me all about it while we get home." "Home?" Rapunzel repeated, a little thrown off by this. She sniffed and wiped her nose. Pascal had paused in his hut-ward marathon to look back at the new development, and seemed to weigh the situation. He didn't immediately rush back to Rapunzel. It was almost as if he thought it was still a good idea to go and inform the others what was happening. "Yes, home," Gothel said, straightening out a simple white shift that had gone askew in Rapunzel's shoulders. "What is this horrid thing? Are you playing a shepherd's wife in some sort of Christmas pageant? Ugh, look at that cut. We'll get you cleaned up and into one of these other dresses, and I'll make you your favorite soup for you." "But—" Rapunzel looked back over to where the hut was, where Pascal had decided to keep heading for reasons known only to himself. The shock of joy of having been rescued by her mother was now ebbing like morning mist from the forest. And behind these initially good feelings was a mass of confusion, reasons, questions, issues, problems. The simplest one out in its quest to get through her lips. "But I want to introduce you to my friends." Gothel laughed, tinkling and long. "Oh, I'm sure they don't want to meet little old me. No, it's best to get at it while the getting's good, as they say. No time for long goodbyes. We want to avoid being caught again, don't we?" "But shouldn't we warn them, at least?" Rapunzel persisted. "They don't know what happened to me, or that there are dangerous men in the valley. They shouldn't be prepared for a— Wait, how did you find me? This place. It's hidden magically somehow." Gothel looked a little taken aback by this last question. "Well, I have my own way with the arts, you know," her mother said. "I tracked you." "If you have your own way with the arts, why didn't you know the truth about my hair?" Rapunzel demanded, pointing at the tresses that hung around her shoulders. "That it doesn't just kill, that it's harmless unless I purposely summon the powers, that I can go do other things, and that I won't die if it's cut?" Gothel drew back, lips parting slightly, as if slowly inhaling at the breath of the entire world. Finally she spoke. "I'm not perfect, dearest. I did my best. Imagine being given a child with powers that just killed her parents." "I didn't kill my parents," Rapunzel interrupted. "Oh, so you know." Gothel bit her lip and looked sad. "The king and queen were only trying to do what was best for their country. Don't blame them." "I wasn't," Rapunzel said in confusion. Her mother wasn't even trying to deny it. "Look, we can sort all this out at home. We can maybe even arrange a meeting with your parents. Would you like that? I think you're old enough to handle it. I'm new to this whole mothering business, Rapunzel. I've thought of you as my baby, my first, my last, for too long. I don't want to lose you, and that is selfish, I know." She sighed. "It was wrong of me. You should have known the truth years ago. Come now, and I'll fix everything, I promise. We'll get you cleaned up, get a good meal, and have a good night's sleep, and then I'll see about the king and queen. Your parents." Rapunzel started to nod. It was all coming together. It was all so easy. After being violently seized and manhandled, the idea of being in her own bed with her own things and being a nice long nap sounded heavenly. And her parents. Maybe Gothel was changing? Maybe her mother just needed a chance to see how serious Rapunzel was about wanting to leave and see the lanterns, the world. And now that she had, the relationship had shifted. She was seeing her daughter as an adult, ready to take on the truth about her background. Only, she had accepted all these new things Rapunzel had said without contradicting anything or batting an eyelash. Wouldn't someone who genuinely believed for 20 years that her daughter's hair could kill maybe show some surprise at these revelations? Happiness at the way things actually were? And since Rapunzel was already out in the world, wouldn't she maybe go see her parents? Herself? Now? Without going home first? Gothel turned to leave, having put the knife in her belt, a little smugly, and was starting to walk away already. No, Rapunzel said quieter than she meant to, louder than she imagined. The tip of Pascal's tail curled a little. No, she repeated firmly. Gothel stopped and turned. Just a little, not all the way, as if it wasn't worth turning all the way around for, and maybe because turning all the way would mean a real line in the sand had been drawn, admitting that there was a challenge to her authority. No? She asked neutrally. No, Mother. At least not right away. Rapunzel wasn't sure if she should feel like a coward for saying that second bit. I'm not abandoning my friends while there's dangerous men nearby, and I'm not leaving without saying goodbye. I'm not even sure I am leaving yet. But of course you are, dear, Gothel said with a bright smile. That was maybe colder than she intended, the light of a failed wishing star rather than a warm fire. Where else would you go? Mummy will take care of you, treat your wounds, feed you. No, I'm sorry, no, Rapunzel said, trying not to cross her arms. Not yet. I have things to do. What things? Gothel asked, approaching her slowly and seeming to grow, looming over her daughter. Things? Rapunzel faltered a little, feeling stupid. I want to study my hair, feed the goats, talk to Flynn. Listen to you, you're raving. Feed the goats, indeed. We must have gotten a bad knock on the head, poor girl. Come with me before something worse happens. And with that, Gothel took Rapunzel's hand and began to walk away, again forcibly pulling her behind. I said no, Rapunzel said, whipping her hand away. It stung with the friction. Come with me if you want to meet the people who have helped me, or go home by yourself. I am not going there with you now. You will do as I say. I am your mother, Gothel hissed. I am 19, Rapunzel said calmly. I'm an adult. Most girls are already married by this time. At this, Gothel unexpectedly began to laugh. It was ugly, and her eyes shone with evil irony. Oh, you have no idea, she whispered. I was going to do this the easy way. I was going to make things straightforward and painless for you. But it seems like you'll listen to is force. What are you talking about? Mother? Rapunzel demanded, caught up in the sharp, narrow place between anger and fear. What are you saying? A voice rang out from somewhere in the forest. Rapunzel? Flynn? Rapunzel spun, looking around for him. Where are you? Gina cried from someplace else nearby. Rapunzel turned back, but her mother was gone, faded into the shadows away. No trace of her ever having been there at all, but for the unconscious man on the ground and the knife missing in his belt. Here, she finished uneasily.